Chicago, Illinois, 1893. An estimated 27 million people from all over the world flocked to the World's Columbian Exposition, otherwise known as the Chicago World's Fair. It is so named in honor of the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's landing in the New World. Having risen from the ashes of the Great Chicago Fire, the city now shines brighter than ever, illuminating the fairgrounds with nearly 100,000 electric lamps. But lurking in the shadows is a sadistic killer, Herman Webster Mudgett, better known by his alias H.H. Holmes.
H.H. Holmes was extremely clever. He was a pharmacist, actually. His home was set up for single women who came to the city to make their way, to get involved, to become part of this wonderful exposition that was going on. So H.H. Holmes had access to many, many single women, and he murdered them.
Holmes had spent a great deal of time in preparation for his murders. It wasn't like it was on impulse. There was a lot of control here. I think that he enjoyed the power he had over people in general, and the World's Fair really played out well for him.
Holmes became rich as a cunning and charismatic con artist. He swindled several people out of their fortunes and used the proceeds to build a one-of-a-kind mansion which allowed him to pursue his darkest desires. The macabre edifice would eventually become known as Holmes's Murder Castle.
H.H. Holmes built this phenomenally complex castle with enough rooms that he could rent rooms to people who came in for the exposition, mostly single women. And he would go out and advertise this, and bring people in, put them in these rooms where they felt they were safe.
It was almost like the spider to the fly. It was like, come and see my mansion, an elaborate mansion. He had all kinds of odd staircases and tunnels and chutes and things. So then he would gas these victims and then send them down the chutes into the basement and then torture them, or if they were already dead, then he could take apart the bodies, which he did.
On November 17, 1894, the man known as America's first serial killer was finally arrested. But only then did investigators begin to learn the full extent of H.H. Holmes's murderous behavior. After confessing to the murders of 27 young women, on May 7, 1896, Holmes, now referred to by the press as the Devil in the White City, was hanged by the neck until dead. High in the mountains of central China, along the banks of the Yangtze River, lies a complex of shrines and temples that is known as Fengdu Ghost City. According to Chinese legend, Fengdu is considered to be a place where our world meets the underworld.
As you're approaching Fengdu City on Ming Mountain, you're imagining something that's going to be beautiful, but instead you see these depictions of hellish images, and devilish creatures are actually devouring human beings.
One of the first things that you encounter when entering the complex is actually a gate that is shaped as a head of a demon, and you have to enter it through its open mouth. So it's a very impressive first sight that the visitor encounters.
Walking through this complex is like walking through hell itself. It's supposedly the place where the devil actually resides.
The vast array of devilish statues and carvings found throughout Fengdu have earned the city a ghoulish reputation. But why did the ancient Chinese feel the need to create an entire city filled with such ghastly depictions of the forces of evil? Well, Fengdu Ghost City is believed to have been first built during the Han Dynasty, around the year 200 AD. The city was constructed to represent Chinese beliefs about the afterlife and how a person's soul is judged after death.
The Fengdu Ghost City is a type of purgatory space in Chinese conceptions of the underworld. It's a place where the souls of recently deceased people are brought so that they can be in front of the court of the underworld and tried and judged for all of the actions, the good deeds and the misdeeds that they performed during their life. If their karmic balance is positive, then after their judgment, they are taken to various celestial realms where they can enjoy nicer afterlife. If your misdeeds overshadowed your good deeds during your life, then you will be unable to complete this trial, and you will be presented for judgment forthwith and then carry out your sentence.
The final judgment takes place inside the oldest temple in the city, where a person's soul is put on trial by King Yama, the gatekeeper to hell.
This main building, which is actually King Yama's court, is presided over by a statue of King Yama, very fearsome in appearance. King Yama is the overseer of the underworld in the Chinese tradition, so he judges the deeds and misdeeds of the deceased and oversees all of this distribution of post-mortem justice. So he's bringing down the full power of the underworld state to bear on the people that he judges, and he is also flanked by a retinue of demons. Their role is to dole out the punishment and to make sure that the punishment is respected. For those who don't go straight to the celestial realms, they have to spend a certain amount of time in the 18 levels of hell. And you have a variety of hells. You have the hell of burning oil, you have the hell of fire, you have the blood pool hell, in which you have to spend a time sometimes close to eternity. The fact that this has become a major site that is open to the public and that people can visit perhaps serves as a kind of warning or an incitement for people to live more moral lives and to be kinder to others.
The idea that your soul can be doomed to hell for eternity is concerning, to say the least, but it also raises an intriguing question. What led people to believe that this particular location was so strongly connected to the devil and hell in the first place?
There's a long history of connecting Fengdu to the gate of hell, the Guimenguan, or the gate of demons. And this is considered to be the actual gate to hell, to the courts of the underworld. It's the actual entrance portal to the netherworld. This portal to hell is actually a two-way portal. So not only can the deceased enter it to get to the netherworld, but you have demons of the netherworld who are allowed to leave, who can emerge from it and sometimes wreak havoc in the world of the living.
Erie, Pennsylvania, August 28, 2003, 2:30 p.m. It's an ordinary day at a downtown PNC bank when 46-year-old Brian Wells gets in line to see the teller. But Brian Wells is no ordinary customer.
Mr. Wells had a protrusion under the shirt that was described like someone had a medical injury that was under his neck. Mr. Wells handed the teller a note and said, "This is a bank robbery and I need $250,000 in cash."
The demand note said there's a bomb strapped around his neck. The teller informed Brian Wells that she couldn't access the bank vault, and so she ended up giving him about $8,000.
Brian Wells walked out of the bank with only a fraction of the amount of money that he had demanded. And he didn't make it very far because the bank called the police the moment Brian left.
I get dispatched like any other law enforcement officer. Hey, there's a bank robbery, 7200 Peach, potential explosive device used. After leaving the bank, within 5 minutes, Mr. Wells is located and apprehended by the Pennsylvania State Police. And he advises that he does have a bomb under his shirt. We didn't know if he was a hostage or if he was a cooperator. We had no idea. He said, I'm a pizza delivery driver. I went to deliver pizzas and these people accosted me and made me wear the device and rob the bank. I think it's one of those real moments that you're thinking, it's probably a hoax, because I can't tell you how many hoax bank robberies I was at where people indicate they have an explosive device and it's a hoax. But you have to believe that it's real. And we notified the bomb squad. His demeanor was getting agitated as we were waiting for the bomb squad. He was saying, hey, can I have a cigarette? This is heavy, but we still don't know if it's fake or real at that point.
At 3:18 p.m., without warning, the bomb detonated. And Brian Wells died instantly.
I mean, that's just some moment you'll never forget in your lifetime. It's not uncommon for a bank robber to say they have a device and it's going to go off. That's not uncommon. What's uncommon is for it to actually happen. Brian was a very nice guy, and for his family, I will always be sorry for what they went through to see that happen on TV. But you immediately have to gain control of the scene. So we did a search of Brian Wells' vehicle, and inside we found a series of notes, 9 total pages, really bizarre notes, and way too detailed and complex like you couldn't believe. Some were made to the teller, some were made to police and what not to do. Some were made to Brian Wells specifically, saying, Wells, after you rob the bank, this is the series of stops that you're to make to obtain keys to get the device off of your neck.
It's like he was on a scavenger hunt, and at each location, he would find a key or a code that would be one step closer for him being able to remove the bomb from him. I mean, never in our history has a man walked into a bank with a bomb strapped around his neck with orders to complete a scavenger hunt to have the bomb removed.
The design of the collar and the box that the collar held was very unique. It was basically like a large handcuff on the collar portion. Below the collar was a box, and the box held 2 pipe bombs and 2 kitchen timers. The bomb squad said it was one of the most diabolical killing machines they had ever seen, and that's because it was one of a kind. It was made specifically for this event. Initially, we had never seen anything like this. We just had to start very much in a methodical process putting the pieces together.
The criminal mastermind clearly spent so much time doing this. The mastermind is obviously delighting in playing a game with the police. And then when they can't solve it, that is a huge boost to their own ego. And the longer they could delay the police actually finding real answers, the more they would feel amazing about themselves. And the mastermind behind the Brian Wells case was clearly trying to do that.
In search of answers, investigators traced Wells's movements earlier in the day. They went to a nearby television tower where Wells had made his last pizza delivery.
He said when he went there and got to the back of the site, he was accosted by a group of individuals who told him to rob the bank, and then he will have notes to follow to get the keys to get the device off.
But when the cops checked out the area, they found that the tower was abandoned and the trail went cold. That is, until 3 weeks later, when local handyman Bill Rothstein, who just happened to live right next to the TV tower, called 911.
Please, what's your emergency?
At 8645 Peach Street, in the garage, there is a frozen body. It's in the freezer in the garage.
The police determined that the body in Bill Rothstein's freezer was a man named James Roden, the boyfriend of Marjorie Deal Armstrong, a woman who was all too familiar to the local authorities.
Marjorie Diehl Armstrong was almost like a black widow of sorts, where she left a series of mysterious deaths. Her husband and several boyfriends in the local area. Roden was a former lover, boyfriend of hers, and she ended up killing the man with a shotgun. She asked Rothstein to dispose of the body for her. And he ends up leaving it in his freezer in his garage.
After interviews with Marjorie Diehl Armstrong and others, we determined that Marjorie Diehl Armstrong's father had a lot of money, and she was the only child, and she wanted the money, and she wanted it now. So the whole idea to rob the bank for the money really came from Marjorie Diehl Armstrong. Rob the bank to get the money to pay someone to kill her father to get her inheritance.
On November 1st, 2010, Marjorie Diehl Armstrong was convicted of armed bank robbery, conspiracy to commit armed bank robbery, and of using a destructive device in a crime. In the eyes of many, these convictions confirmed that Marjorie was the mastermind of the Collard bomb robbery and responsible for the deaths of both Brian Wells and James Roden. Clarksdale, Mississippi. This small town, located within an area known as the Mississippi Delta, has been called the birthplace of the blues.
The Delta blues music basically started in the early 20s, and it came from Mississippi, and it was African-American musicians who sang very soulfully, very fiercely with their guitars, with their harmonicas, and it wasn't usually a whole band, it was usually an individual person.
Of all the blues musicians to play in Clarksdale during the 1920s and 30s, one of the most influential was a guitarist, singer, and songwriter named Robert Johnson.
Robert Johnson, before he got really famous, he would go down on the corner and play his blues music. But early on in Robert Johnson's career, he wasn't that good. And the Delta people would tell Robert Johnson, you go to the cemetery and play, and you would have a big audience, and nobody would complain how bad you play your music.
Robert Johnson, in his early part of his career, was an okay harmonica player, not a great guitar player. He just basically thrown out of places because he really wasn't considered very good.
He really wasn't good at all, but he kept on wanting to do it, to show people that he had potential.
When faced with the prospect of having his musical ambitions thwarted, according to legend, Robert Johnson chose to enlist the help of a higher power by making a deal with the devil.
People in the Delta would say, if you play blues at midnight at the crossroads, you're gonna meet a lot of strange peoples, and you might meet Satan himself at the crossroads. And so Robert Johnson went to the crossroads that Saturday night.
He really went to the crossroads, gave his guitar to the devil. The devil strummed it a few times and gave it back to him. And from that moment on, he sold his soul to the devil and became an amazing guitar player overnight. And that's how the legend goes.
He came back maybe 2.5 or 3 hours later and said this guy was a different person. After he left the crossroad, he was doing stuff that he couldn't do before. Whatever he did, he never was the same again. Honey Boy said he could play so great. People would come from here and yonder to hear this guy play his music. This guy seemed like he had a magnet after he left the crossroad.
From that point on, he became an amazing guitar player. It's just a lot different what any musician could do. Robert Johnson's legacy will live for many, many years. You cannot listen to a song from the Beatles, Eric Clapton, Led Zeppelin, or from the Rolling Stones without giving credit to Robert Johnson's style that many of these musicians copied. And even Keith Richards said he could play the guitar like three musicians together. He had that ability.
Today, Robert Johnson is widely considered to be one of the greatest blues performers of all time. And his songs are among the most influential recordings in the history of popular music. But there are many who point to the lyrics of his songs as evidence that he really did make a pact with Satan in order to achieve greatness.
Robert Johnson, in his music, refers to the devil basically by saying, I went to the crossroads and fell on my knees. And he asked the Lord for mercy.
If you believe that the devil is ever present, that you can encounter him on the crossroads, then that's a really critical idea in forming this notion of the Faustian bargain, the deal with the devil, this promise of their souls in exchange for something else from Satan. This is key to the fear of the devil, that Satan could be so knowing, so ubiquitous, so powerful, that he could know your secret wants, and he could offer something to you, and you might be willing to take it depending on your circumstance.
Did Robert Johnson sell his soul to the devil? It's a question that is hard to answer. But the mysterious circumstances surrounding his death in 1938 have helped perpetuate the myth.
Robert Johnson's death is basically a mystery. Many say that he met up with a jealous husband after flirting with his wife, and the husband gave him a bottle of whiskey that was filled with poison. There's many other theories of how he passed away, but many people say he just died. And maybe it was time for the devil to take his soul.